Agua ardente. I did my first shot when I was 7 years old. Damp forehead, eyes wider than a bottleneck. What is more deceptive than a glass of fire that looks like water? Can you really ever trust anything again when the thing that is meant to hose down your tiny burning euphoria makes of you a volcanic body? Some lessons are learned before we are taught to know ourselves. I learned to trust my taste over my sight. You can never really tell how acidic a person can be simply by looking. Agua ardente translates literally to water burning. I have come to realize that I am both swimming in it and setting it alight.
C'est la nuit. Pluie. Les lumières du cinéma se rejettent par terre. La foule sort, se disperse. Restent deux femmes et un parapluie au coin de la rue.
Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Poetry to Your Ears. I'm Lulu, and I'm with Tom, my co-host.
Hello.
And today we're joined with Romina Ramos. Hello, Romina.
Hello.
We're so excited to have you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
I'm going to read your bio.
Yep.
So, Romina Ramos is a gender-fluid Portuguese writer based in the northwest of England. Their writing explores themes of dislocation, identity, and intergenerational immigration. Their work has been shortlisted for the Penguin Random House imprint, Murky Books New Writers Prize, and the Britport Prize for Poetry. They also won the Carcanet Prize for Poetry. They live in Bolton, and they started an open mic night, Natter Bolton, and you published your first poetry pamphlet, Sardines, with Ben Key Publishing. That's their gorgeous cover.
Thank you.
Really gorgeous cover. Yeah. It reminds me of Normal People. Do you know?
Yes.
The cover of Normal People.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was intentional. So, there's your poetry collection's about being Portuguese and moving to England, and it's got that link with the Sardines from Portugal and the northwest of England. I was wondering how you chose Sardines as being the theme of your collection.
It's funny. I get this question all the time, and I always say that they chose me. When I started writing this collection, which I didn't realize was going to be a collection, I was just writing. It was in my final year of my BA at university.
What did you study?
Creative writing.
Okay.
So I was getting together a creative portfolio, which was 15 poems, to submit for my dissertation kind of thing, if you will. And in my very first feedback from my tutor, it was like, "Are you aware that the sardines in all of your poems?" And I hadn't figured that out myself. They just appeared there. But I think it has a lot to do with the fact that I lost my grandparents quite close together a few years ago, and that's who I grew up with until I moved to England. I grew up with my grandparents, and sardines were really, really big in the diet in our household in the south of Portugal. The town that I'm from particularly is known for sardines. And so throughout my childhood, I have many memories involving sardines, be it going down to the fishing dock at 6 o'clock in the morning with my granddad to get buckets of sardines fresh from the fishing boats, or pondering around the kitchen while my grandma was gutting them and preparing them and grilling them and things like that. And I think, losing them, and then that's around the time that I was starting to write a lot of poetry, and they just appeared in the poems. And then when I came to submit something for Bent Key, I needed a title, and it just seemed like it couldn't be anything else.
That's great.
Hello, Lulu here. I hope you're enjoying the conversation so far. I have an exciting announcement to make before you can continue listening. Poetry to Your Ears is now sponsored by Ben Key Publishing. Benki Publishing is an indie micro-publisher that champions neurodiverse artists and writers from other marginalized groups. So you can get a 10% discount on all books with the code Poetry to Your Ears 10. This code doesn't apply to zines, but it covers all books on their website, which is www.bentkeypublishing.co.uk. The code and the website link will be written in the episode description. We hope you find a poetry book you like, and tell us on social media if you purchase one. Now, back to our conversation. So when you studied creative writing, did you know you wanted to write poetry, or were you exploring with different mediums?
Yeah, I was exploring different mediums, and obviously across the degree you have to do 3 creative modules, which are fiction writing, script writing, and poetry writing. But I really discovered my love for poetry during that degree, and obviously then in the 3rd year you can only pick one, and I knew then that it was poetry that was for me, really. I mean, I do write fiction and bits and bobs, but I think poetry is what I love.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what is that? What is it that makes it the most important to you?
I think I really enjoy telling a full story in a very limited amount of words, because you have to pick every word very carefully. It has to earn its place. It has to mean something. It has to earn its place, I think, and I think I just really enjoy that challenge. I always say that in Sardines, there's loads of little stories as part of a big story. I feel like every poem does very clearly tell a story in its own right, and I feel like that's what I love about poetry.
Do you want to read us a poem? Oh, sorry, Tom. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
Do I want to read a poem? Yeah, of course. Yeah. I actually have 2 memorized, luckily for me, because I thought I had some books in the car, but I realized that I don't. But it's fine because I know them. This poem, which I'll read now, is called "Yeah, But Where From Really." It's one of the first poems that was written for this collection, and it's I think it encapsulates everything that this collection is. So I'll read it for you now. I come from a place where people drink 8 espressos a day, where sardines are fished from the sea at 5 a.m. and grilled for tourists at a local restaurant by noon. I come from grains of sand in the Atlantic Ocean. I come from long, hot summer days swimming with inflatable dolphins and winter Sunday mornings building sandcastles with pink gloves on. I come from Catholic women and faithless men. I come from women who raise the children of other women and men who do not raise their own. I come from single parents. I came to this place where it rains torrentially in July, while brightly coloured trucks whistle through photocopied streets, selling rainbows in cones to local children. I came to this place where football is a religion, fish and chips on a Friday night a tradition, where schools have uniforms, but I am still the odd one out. Plaid skirts can't hide the stretch marks of nationality. They say, yeah, but where from really? Like my split tongue doesn't quite fit in this island's mouth. But the thing is, I don't even like sardines, and I take my coffee white with milk and sugar. Thank you.
It's so funny because that's the one I chose that I wanted you to read.
Ah, brilliant.
Yeah.
What's it called?
Yeah, but where from really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a classic, you know. I really like how you navigate identity and how complex it is, and especially the last lines, like I don't even like sardines and I take my coffee white with milk and sugar.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just shows how being French, I have that a lot, like trying to show that I'm French in some ways, even though there's some stuff that I do. I don't drink espresso either, and it's like a very French thing.
Yeah.
And and it's like when you're abroad, you have to re-navigate your own identity and your origins, kind of reclaim them.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like for me, when I came here so young, I was 11 years old, and I spent a lot of time. Kids in school are obviously mean, but I spent a lot of time trying to fit in with them, with people here, trying to be more British, trying to really thicken up my accent and all these things. But then the result of that was that when I would go back to Portugal for the summer, I wasn't Portuguese enough for the Portuguese people. So I've kind of always been stuck in the middle, and I have been told by, my Portuguese friends and distant family, like, you don't like sardines, like, you're not even Portuguese, So I had to get that into that poem because it kind of shows that I didn't feel English enough and Portuguese enough, so I'm kind of like stuck in the middle, I suppose.
Mm-mm. And I think it's an interesting title because that's a question that's often asked to people who are not white, regardless of how long they lived in the UK, if they were born in the UK, because it shows that how restrictive the English identity can be, or its perception.
Yeah.
But I find it interesting that people ask you that question.
I don't get it so much now because I feel like I pass for English now very easily a lot of the time. But when I first moved here for the first few years, I got it a lot just because of the accent. Obviously, I've always been white, but when I came here, I did have brown, olive skin. You'd say my skin was brown because I spent the whole summer I was spent on the beach. Obviously now it's very pasty, and I've been here too long. But yeah,
not enough sun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. But do you have that then when you come back to Portugal, where people ask you if you're Portuguese?
Yeah. My Portuguese.
But I mean, you're speaking Portuguese when you're
in
Portugal,
I speak Portuguese. I speak Portuguese to my mom and my auntie, stuff that I have here. So I speak fluent Portuguese, but I to a Portuguese person, it would probably seem a little bit rusty,
Do they think you're like Spanish or something like that? They think you're like from somewhere close. Or
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I was wondering, in the structure, your book is like structured in 3 parts, and it's 1, 2, 3. Yep. I was wondering how you structured your poems into the book.
I kind of wanted it to be like a journey. So the first part is heavily about the migrating and the 2 different countries and things like that, and then in the middle I've dedicated that to my family, just because they've been a very big part of who I am, I suppose, and me getting to know who I am and things like that. And then the last part is more like, okay, coming to terms with who I am, my identity and stuff. So I kind of wanted it to be a journey. You set off from Portugal in the first part. It's the migrating over, my family a part of that, and then at the end it's like, I've arrived. This is who I am. That's the reason for that and what I was aiming to achieve with that.
And so you write in both languages, and there's a couple of poems that I believe are English translations from Portuguese. Do you write kind of 50-50?
No, actually,
Portuguese, English, or no?
I haven't never written a full poem in Portuguese. They've always been translated from English into the Portuguese, which is funny. But it's but yeah, I translated I wrote all those poems in English first, and then I decided that I wanted them in there translated, so I set about translating them myself, and I did that. But they were written primarily in English, and then moved over into Portuguese.
Yeah, is your poet voice in English?
Yeah, I don't know when it happened, but at some point I started thinking in English and dreaming in English, and yeah, I'm always having to translate because, like I said, I still speak Portuguese to my mum and my family and stuff. But I think of what I want to say in English, and then I have to translate it over to Portuguese. So it's I'm in constant translation. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bit different from you, Eloise. Like, you seem to say that, like, you feel like you're English when you write in English. It's a bit more authentic, like coming from your emotions rather than.
But that's why it's similar.
Rather than, like, it's being part of a scheme.
It's not that different, I think. Now, most things come to me in English, and yeah, when I speak to my family, I kind of have to translate, and it's a bit bumpy. When I come back to France after a couple of days, I start thinking in French again. Yeah. But when I'm in England, yeah, my brain's kind of moved to English, and it's just when I think of like childhood memories that I could go into French, like stuff that people said to me. But
what happens when you write poetry in French? Like, can you write poetry in French?
I can, but it's not as fluid as it used to be a couple years ago. A couple years ago, my brain would be primarily in French. And now I've written so much poetry in English that I think, and I'm reading so much poetry in English as well. I'm not reading a lot of French poetry.
I wonder if it's just like a skill thing, like a craft thing, you know, like
yeah,
you're more used to writing in English, so it's like you developed that, right?
It's about like giving oil to your bike. You know? It's like
yeah, no.
Yeah. So yeah, I feel like we may have a similar experience in that regard.
I feel like English is. I find English easier to express myself because I feel like there's more words, there's more meaning. There's in Portuguese. I find that a little bit more restrictive. Yeah, I feel like there's.
But Portuguese is quite a nice singing language, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a lovely language. I do love it, and I'd like to write more in it. But yeah, I feel like there's more. You can say more in English, I think.
I mean, there's a lot of words in English.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was wondering.
Too many.
So these two poems that you translated then from English, how did you choose them to translate rather than other poems?
Because I wanted that middle bit to be for my family. So there's a poem for my mum, there's a poem for my dad, and there's a poem from my maternal grandparents, one each. And it made sense to have them because they're all Portuguese. And I wanted to be able to. I wanted my Portuguese family to be able to pick the book up and at least read them and understand them. So it just made sense for it to be them.
These ones have images as well.
Yeah.
And,
so my mother one, it's me and my mum, and my grandmother. I don't think I'm in that one, but it's my grandmother and my granddad. Again, it's just my granddad. And then my dad, I never met my dad, actually. So I had to dig deep and find that picture online because I knew that he played for a specific Portuguese team back in the 90s, and that's how I came across that photo. Yes. Yeah. He was a footballer back in the 90s, up until 96, I believe. Yeah, exactly, yeah. So that's how I found that photo. It was I had searched online for the team and ended up finding it that way.
Do you want to read us that one?
Yeah, that was actually my second choice to read to you today. So great.
How in sync.
Yeah, great minds. I love performing this one out loud. So I'll read you this one now. My father was an athlete. He ran out of the maternity ward so fast, he got to the finish line before I even opened my eyes for the first time. And every man that came after him treated us like it was a race, but the loser was always my mother. My therapist says this metaphor is not healthy, but the thing is, my father really was an athlete. He played professional football for a small division Portuguese team, so maybe instead of a hat-trick, I was a red card, a foul, a stretcher at half-time. I don't really know much about football or about parenthood, but I do know this. My father was offside. And I think I missed a little line there, but yeah.
So maybe my mother was the pitch,
Yes,
and I was a goal in the back of the wrong net.
Yeah.
Do you know
It's an
in
interesting
Portuguese? Sorry, Tom. Go ahead.
There's an interesting use of offside. You know, it's like you kind of reappropriated that term, right? Like it's a bit like I've never rethought about offside.
Yeah. Well, the literal translation to that in Portuguese is out of the game. And I did actually think about that when I was writing this poem, even though I did write it in English. But I was thinking about what that would mean in Portuguese, and I felt like it was appropriate.
Do you know in Portuguese by heart? This poem?
No, not by heart.
Because that would be lovely to hear you say it.
So you, I got the impression that you perform live quite often.
Yeah, I do.
Have you been down to Brighton?
I haven't.
Before?
No, I am this year wanting to get out of Manchester performing. I'm going down to Sheffield at the end of this month for a new night there. But I would love to go. I would love to go to Brighton. I've never been to Brighton. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so that's where you mostly perform then,
Manchester. Obviously, I run my night in Bolton at this cafe where I'm at right now. But yeah, Manchester is where I primarily perform. Yeah.
Is it how you met them?
Sorry.
Is that how you met? What's her name?
Rebecca.
Yeah. Rebecca.
Yeah, that is how I met Rebecca. Actually.
Sorry.
Yeah. I met Rebecca. We started gigging at the same time. So I'd graduated in the summer of 2021. Is it? Or 2020? Yeah, 2021.
Who's
She's
Rebecca?
the founder of Ben Key.
She's the...
Yeah, Rebecca Kenny. So she founded Ben Key. And I met her. My very first gig at Open Mic Night was her second. And it was just like 2 or 3 days before she had the big car crash that led to Ben Key. But yeah, that's how I met her. I met her out and about gigging. Yeah. Yeah,
and Manchester has quite a strong poetry scene. Doesn't
it's huge. Yeah, there's still new nights popping up everywhere. But yeah, I mean the scene is huge. It's big. There's many nights happening and all sorts of different nights as well.
And what do you recommend for like a beginner in the Manchester scene? Like where should we go when we first come?
I would say definitely check out Ramos. They won the Sabato Best Poetry Night in Manchester. Well, in the country, I believe. Yeah, that's really fantastic night. It's held at the King's Arms in Salford, which is this cute little pub, but they've got a theatre room upstairs and they use that for verbose. It's a really fantastic night, really welcoming, and they get established people and emerging artists all together, which is fantastic. They have headliners every month and then they open up the floor to open micers. Last month they had people like Ellen Moore headlining for them. So yeah, it's like the second night I ever did was verbose, and it's definitely recommend that one to start off with for sure.
Was it intimidating for you when you?
Yeah, I mean the first ever night I picked was a night called Saying in Manchester, and it's like one of the biggest ones. I don't know why, but I thought if I'm going to do something, I just need to do it. So I went and put my name down for that, and it was daunting. Yeah, it was daunting to begin with. Yeah.
And what was the poem that you did? What was the first poem
The
you did?
first poem I
night?
did that night was "My Father Was an Athlete," and then I
Yeah.
did another one. Can't remember the title of it now, but it was for my portfolio as well. I did the 3 poems that I'd sent to Murky Books, and got shortlisted for it because I thought, if I made Murky Books, I mean, Storms is ready, give me feedback on it. So I think that it'll be well received, and yeah.
Can you get
Storms is a rapper.
shortlisted?
I got shortlisted, so I got longlisted first, which I couldn't believe, and then I got shortlisted. So I made the top 10 out of like 2,500, which is incredible. Like, to think, you know,
Wow, yeah.
I'm still when I think about that, I actually got that. I'm still a bit like shocked, but yeah, no, it was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it really helps you, you know, boost your confidence.
Yeah, absolutely,
and,
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and how is it running your night then? Because it seems that there's not much of a poetry scene in Bolton, as you're saying.
No, there's
apart
one
from
other
your
night in Bolton, which is run by a fantastic guy called Dave Morgan. I have no issues with them whatsoever, but it's very white middle class men who attend, which is fine. You know, everyone needs their own place. But my reason to start Natter was because I wanted something that was inclusive. Not that they're not inclusive. Like, I had someone from Bentkey launched a book last night, actually, and we were there where they were on that night with a lot of that crowd, and they're all absolutely amazing, fantastic, really welcoming. That's not what I'm saying, but I feel like the people that tend to go are very like middle class white men, and middle class and middle age as well, and which is, again, it's.
Is it more like kind of like traditional poetry?
Yeah.
Well, or would you say like form,
Yeah.
style? Like, is it like the writing style
Yeah,
as well?
I think so. Yeah, I've never been there myself, actually, because it usually is on a Sunday night, and I do usually have stuff on, but I do want to try and go over one time. No, they're all fantastic, and I will happily go. It's just that I wanted something a bit more inclusive. Like, I'm non-binary. I wanted something where people like that feel welcome to come. I wanted to unite all kinds of people and not just have like one type of person coming. Do you know what I mean?
And the more poetry nights, the better.
Yeah, exactly. There's
so
room for everybody. There's room for everybody, absolutely. And they have they have like headliners there, and they've got Louise Fazaki actually on tonight, who's a Northern poet, who's fantastic. So they're doing fantastic things. But yeah, we're a little bit different. Also, I really like
How's the structure of your night?
Sorry?
How's the structure of your night? How do you organise it?
First of all, it's a non-alcoholic venue, which I think is great. A lot of people like that because, like Tuesday, we just had our first one of the year last Tuesday, and one of the poets didn't have a babysitter and last minute, and said, "Can I bring my toddler?" I was like, "You absolutely can bring your toddler, yeah, that's absolutely fine." So, and then I have another lady who usually brings a 14-year-old daughter, and they may not do that if we were in a busy pub. So, you know, that's a nice element to it. But we welcome everything here. There's music. We had a play, a scripting and reading of a play this time. We usually have a musician coming in. So it's not like just a poetry night. I'd like to say it's like a creative open mic space for anyone, which I quite like, because it sometimes I love going to poetry nights myself. But sometimes you sit there for 2 hours listening to like quite deep, quite personal stuff, and it can get a lot, can't it? So I like to have stuff that breaks up the poetry. Yeah.
So is it quite a light-hearted night then, if you can have teenagers coming?
Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely no limit. All I say is be respectful. Don't have any derogatory stuff, any racist, homophobic stuff. None of that. But you can swear, you can talk about absolutely anything you want to talk about. I don't put any censorship on anything. And then likewise, I say to my audience, you can bring your children and stuff, but just be aware that someone could be talking about suicide, someone could be talking about mental health matters and all these things. So as long as they're okay with that, then yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. And the cafe that you're working in is a Portuguese cafe.
It is, yeah.
So does that link you to the Portuguese community in Bolton?
Yeah. We have a very wide range of people coming over. We have local people from Bolton who are just clients to the cafe. They quite like a bit of poetry, and then we have people that do go to all these nights, and then they come here as well. It's a varied range of people to come and watch, for sure.
Yeah. Did you know any Portuguese people in Bolton who read your book, who read Sardines?
Yeah, I have. Yeah. Quite a few people bought it, and to show their support and stuff. But it's funny because a lot of people come to me after, it's like, oh, I didn't realise poetry was like this, because a lot of people, as I'm sure you guys know, have some misconceptions about poetry. They think it's all very Shakespearean and very, all this kind of stuff. And really, it's not. Like, we've been having a conversation with the Waterstones in Bolton at the moment to try and get our books in there, because there's three Benki writers that live in Bolton and are writing in Bolton, and which have just released books. But they've kind of sent us an email going, oh, people in Bolton don't really read poetry. And we kind of felt a bit, we didn't really...
The Waterstones?
Yeah, the manager replied to the email.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's really...
And kind of said,
weird.
yeah, poetry doesn't sell in Bolton.
Yeah.
But you know why it doesn't sell in Bolton? Because if you go into the Waterstones in Bolton, it's all Shakespeare, Yeats, it's all dead poets, and maybe that's why it's not selling.
Yeah.
That's why it's
If
not
you
selling.
market- If you market poetry, then people are going to buy poetry.
Absolutely. We've kind of sent a counter email to them going, we'd like to work with you to change that, and we think it's not the case of people that don't want the poetry. It's a case of it's very limited choice for them that's available in store. I go in there and always leave with a broken heart, because there is nothing new there. It's just Shakespeare's works, Percy Shelley, all these kind of dead poets, which are great and have been great in their own time.
Yeah.
But
You want novelty.
You have to get new blood.
People aren't reading them now.
Yeah.
People,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, it's like fiction books. There's always new books, contemporary authors coming out. So
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's like a band, right? It's like you want to engage with like a poet and artist that's like living as well, right? You want to feel like you've got almost like a parasocial relationship with them.
Yeah,
as
of
well,
course.
Right? You want to be able to go see them live. You want to be able to read their new stuff and look forward to what they're doing.
Well,
the same way you do with bands, right?
absolutely.
people who talk about your living experience, and if you're in Bolton and you write about being in Bolton, then people are going to relate it more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know any of the poetry scene in Portugal? Have you been involved with it in any way?
No, I want to, but I mean, I love Fernando Pessoa. I don't know if you guys have heard of him. He's fantastic. I mean, the guy obviously was way ahead of his time and wasn't recognised while he was alive.
Yeah, can I just say, Eloise, he's the poet who kind of had multiple personalities, but kind of created them so that he could write as different poets. He could write as different authors. He could, and a lot of people think, right, that when they read his stuff, they think, oh, he was schizophrenic or what have you, but he wasn't. He just did this as a method, I suppose. But it was,
I find him so interesting. Like I did a few essays on him at uni, and I have a lot of his books translated and not. I've actually got a poem in my book that's after him. It's called The Smoker, after Fernando Pessoa. He's got this poem called The Tobacco Shop, and there was kind of that. But I mean, It's not in response to that poem. It's heavily inspired in his book, the Book of Disquiet, which is kind of like a fictiony rambling of sorts. But yeah, I find him really, really interesting, and I do go back to him quite often. I try to read some Jose Saramago as well. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's more like stream of consciousness type thing. It's not so much poetry. But yeah, I'm not really on par with the temporary poetry of Portugal from today. But it's something that I've been thinking about getting to know for sure.
Do you know The Smoker by heart?
I don't. I don't think I can leave this app to get it up either, I'm afraid.
We're happy to wait.
Or are you interested
we edit
if
the episodes anyway.
Are you interested if I read it and see how
Yeah,
it sounds in my
Got
voice? Yeah, I've got it. Yeah, it's in the collection, isn't
Just
it?
have to. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That's my first go, so we'll see. The Smoker. I too pluck the souls of flowers and call myself a gardener. Is it still mine if I steal it? I once stole a kiss from a bottle, sank my teeth into its neck, made a trench in the glass. I was ready for war. Oh, Lisbon, my mother birthed me, then spat me out in a veil of fumes. I am comfortable in my disquiet. It is not the river Arade that I love. Or Aradi? How do you say it?
Arad.
Arad. Okay. It is not the river Arad that I love, but the town that carries it on its back, like a mule on market days. O South, my beloved, I have been fishing sardines in your salty waters since your coast gave me permission. Take my cigarette butt for what it is. A small campfire, a rescue mission. Tell mother I am lost, but looking for smoke.
Oh, it's beautiful,
That's a beautiful
actually.
poem.
Beautiful.
Nice.
Someone else read it. Yeah.
Yeah, I always find it interesting, reading other people's poems and having my poems read by other people. Is like different voices, different perspectives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. Like, it's like you're like, yeah, that was pretty good actually. My own poem. It's great. You can.
Yeah.
No, it's like, cause hearing it from someone else's voice.
Yeah.
Like you say,
I always get anxious
it
with
was lovely.
with my French voice, if I pronounce stuff correctly. So, I put a lot of care. Yeah.
That's what we like. We like to hear those differences.
Yeah.
I did try in this book to use Portuguese, even in the English poems. You'll notice in one of two. I think in hearing Portuguese being spoken in the street, I do it a few times, and in bargain hunting, in the Best Buy aisle, I think I do it once or twice in there as well, where I've used Portuguese words in the English version of the poems.
Yeah.
Because I've always had this complex.
Like food.
Yeah, food. Well, you use a lot of the time it is food, yeah. But I've always had this kind of complex growing up where it's like a bit frowned upon where you speak in your own language, in the street, like, or on the bus or whatever it may be. Like, people kind of look at you a bit funny, like. So I struggled with that for a long time, and now that I'm getting older, and I'm like, no, I'm proud of it, it is my language, and I'm proud of that. So I did try and make a conscious effort to write bilingually, I suppose, yeah.
And you have a poem where you say you like hearing people in the street speaking Portuguese.
Yeah, one of my favourite things in the world is just walking down like Market Street in Manchester, and you just hear someone, like, you hear a conversation in Portuguese, and you're like, oh, it just brings you home. I don't know, there's something really lovely about that.
Yeah. Other people having their life in your native language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like your ears just perk up. I don't know if that happens to you, Lou, with French or something, but yeah, I just love that. I don't know.
All the time. There's so many French people in Brighton. It's surprising. And I used to work in a restaurant, and sometimes there would be like some French customers, and they'd speak to me in English with like a a broken English,
Yeah.
trying to speak English like this. And then I switched to French, and they'd be like, "Oh my
Yeah.
god!" And I have a friend. She said some people would actually come back to the restaurant because they were happy to know there would be a French
Yeah.
person in the restaurant.
Yeah.
Know, so
Yeah.
so there is that connection.
Yeah.
Abroad, and I've been to the French embassy with like the friendliest French people that wouldn't be friendly to me like if we were in France, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting that kind of diaspora connection abroad.
Yeah, for sure.
That you have. Yeah. Hey, I hope you're enjoying listening to this episode. This episode is sponsored by Write Bloody UK. They're an independent publisher that publishes bloody beautiful poetry books. You get 10% off all books on their website, writebbloodyuk.co.uk, with the code Poetry to Your Ears. That's 10% off with the code Poetry to Your Ears on the website, writebbloodyuk.co.uk. Hope you enjoy it. Yeah, I was another question I had is how was it getting published by Bent Key then? What was your experience?
Yeah, I'm really inspired by the history of Bent Key. I mean, I knew Rebecca and I quite liked her stuff. I liked her as a person and everything. I didn't know her very well, obviously, because I met her just before the car crash that led to Bent Key. I don't know if you're aware of the whole story, but
you can tell it for the audience.
So Rebecca was a teacher for 17 years, high school teacher, English teacher. And like I said before, we started gigging at the same time. And then she had a terrible car crash, broke a lot of bones. I'm not going to name them all because I'm not even sure I know them all, but she did broke her back, pelvis, sternum, all these things. And I'm just so inspired how she didn't give up. She was just like, turned all this pain and all this trauma. I was like, well, I can't go back to work now. What can I do? And she started Bent Key to amplify the voices of people in the community who had helped her through that time. You know, people, when she was in Aintree in the ICU there, she put a call out for people to write with her, and you know, and she says she was saved by the poetry community, and I just think it's so beautiful that she then wrote this love letter of sorts and created Bent Key for that community. I think it's just like so inspiring, because I think if that was me, I would have just been at home in bed like, oh well, I'm never gonna walk again, and you know. And she'd learned to walk again, and she turned all this pain, physical and otherwise, into like something beautiful, and I think that's just fantastic. And yeah, there was a submission window for chapbooks, and I was umming and ahhing of whether I had a chapbook that was strong enough in the little poems that.
What's a
So
chapbook?
chapbook is a smaller collection. It's not.
It's like a pamphlet.
It's a pamphlet. Yeah, it's a pamphlet. She calls it chapbook, but it's a pamphlet. Yeah, that's it. That's what it is. It's a pamphlet. So it's 30 or less poems. So it's a short.
They're synonyms, I think.
It's like a demo, like an EP.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was umming and ahhing, shall I send something? Have I got something that's strong enough for submission right now? And you know, she was really encouraging. She said, I would absolutely love to publish if you sent something in. Let's chat. And I sent something in last February. It was just before I did the first Natter night here, actually. It was like a week before that, I think. And yeah, when I got home from that first Natter, obviously I was, you know, real on a massive high from a successful night. You know, we had 15 performers, we had 35 people watching. It was fantastic. And I got home, and she actually couldn't be here for, I'm not sure what reason it was at the time. She couldn't be here, and I got home and she asked how it was, blah, blah, and she said, I've read your collection and I absolutely want to publish it. So I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. But she said, will you develop it into a full-length collection? And at the time I said, yeah, of course I will, you know. But that's like 70 poems, and
Yeah. So you're on a
Yeah.
deadline at that point, right?
Yeah.
You're under pressure.
So how many poems did you have then?
So it was
when you
what I
submitted?
submitted was about 25, I think. It was about 25 poems that I'd submitted, as obviously a pamphlet. But yeah, so she said, "Oh, will you develop it?" I said, "Yeah, of course I will." And then, you know, I signed the contract. She took me on, blah blah blah. But the thing with Rebecca is that she's fantastic because I developed the collection into a 70, 75 poem collection. But I just wasn't happy with it as a whole. Not the poems itself. Like, I think there were strong poems and everything else, but it just felt like Sardines have been written over the course of, say, like 5 years. And then I felt like all the other poems I've written was a different book. I felt like I'm concerned with different things. I'm writing about different bits and bops about my life and different aspects of.
What were you writing about that was different?
I feel like now I'm writing a lot more about my gender identity and family dynamics, but different than what's in the book, and different aspects of it. And I just felt like when I was looking at it as a whole collection, I just wasn't happy of it being one book. It did feel like I was cramming two books into one, just because I was trying to develop it into a longer piece. And then a week before publishing, I said to Rebecca, I said, "I'm not happy. Can we just do a chapbook for now?" And she said, "Yeah, absolutely." She said, "If you're not happy, I want you to be happy." So she trusted my vision 100%. And I'm really glad she did.
That's really commendable. You could easily see a situation where it's like, no, we've got more.
Yeah.
You know, we can sell more.
Absolutely.
We can do more with it. That's really great that she's trusted your artistic.
If I had someone like Penguin or you know, someone a bit smaller, but whatever, some of them bigger people, they probably would have just said, "No, you know, you got to do this. You've got the poems. You're gonna have to publish it." But not Rebecca. She was very, very. She trusted my vision 110%, and she was very nurturing and very, very understanding. And I'm very glad, because I'm very proud of this book. It's a comprehensive book, very cohesive. It tells a story. There's a beginning, middle, and an end, and it all connects. Like I say, it's loads of different stories as part of one big story, and it works. And I'm really thankful for her and grateful for her to have trusted me and worked with me on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I really like it as it is. I can really relate to it. It's like a bit of a comfort book to me, as like coming to the UK and all these conflicting identities, you know. So yeah, it's like it stands on its own.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now you have many poems towards the second book as well.
Yeah, exactly. Now I've got poems towards the second book. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, we haven't read Sardines, the actual poem. Yeah, have we?
I think that would be lovely as a intro poem. You know, in the email, I asked you for an intro poem. Which one did you have in mind?
Yeah. What Sardines? I don't have a copy of it. I'm so sorry.
Can you hold up Sardines so that Romina can read it?
It's gonna be. Yeah. Can you even read it?
Yeah. Can you read that?
But that's backwards, no?
If you just bear with me, I think I can just get it really quickly, and I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That's it. Is it backwards?
Oh, you can still hear me, right?
I don't know. Is it?
Don't tell me you can't read backwards, Romina.
Sardines. Oh, okay.
Oh, I can send you a picture.
Can you guys hear me still? Yeah. Oh, perfect. Yeah. So I can just read it right here. So yeah, this is Sardines. We were always 2 or 3 to a bed, sometimes 9 or 10 to a house, an uncle kipping in the tub, a school of infants to a pearly cot, one kitchen for 2 mothers, a single pot to feed a dozen mouths. Though we only ate from tins and were packed in tight like a family of sardines, we were happy.
Yeah, and that, like, where, how come you chose to put that poem? Kind of, it's more in the middle of the collection, right? How, like, for example, why didn't you choose to put that as the first poem or the last poem? Indeed.
Yeah, interestingly, I did have it as the very first poem, but in the drafting stages, my old poetry lecturer from uni was reading and giving me feedback and stuff, and he just suggested that those first 3 poems, so I've got In Line at Sows, Bag and Hunting, and I think, how do you say, and he just said that those were my 3 strongest poems, and just advised that it'd be good to open with them because it sets the scene and people will likely keep reading then. And that's just a creative choice I made, that to move Sardines a bit down for that reason, really.
And it's, you know, the collection's called Sardines, and then that's kind of like the title poem, and it kind of encompasses, you know, all like the key sentiment of you towards your family. And it's a really beautiful and sweet poem, and it's very short and sweet as well compared to, you know, other poems in your collection. And it's interesting to me that you've chosen to keep it short. Was it a case, like, what was the writing process on that? Like, did you just write it all in one go and you said, right, perfect?
It's interesting, that one, because it was never part of this collection until the very end, and there's 2 girls in Manchester who run a company called Blue Balloon Theatre, and every Friday they send out a creative prompt, and sometimes they ask creatives for suggestions for the prompts. And I was scrolling through Instagram in the middle of writing and bits and bots, and I just put the suggestion of a tin of sardines for the prompt for that week, and they actually chose that one for their prompt. So I thought, oh, I'm gonna have to write something here. If, you know, I suggested it, I'm gonna have to write something for it, and that's what I wrote. It was that poem. And then when I came to like ordering everything, I thought it needs to go in there because, you know, it actually fits in with the book perfectly. And even though it was never planned to go in there, or it wasn't written specifically for the book, it was just kind of a throwaway poem, I thought, you know what, it actually says everything about this collection. So
I love again, this it's kind of like reappropriating something, because, you know, in England, in Britain, the thing about like crammed in like sardines, you know, it's kind of like, I think about like the tube or the underground, right? There's like a negative connotation to being crammed in like sardines. It's like a cliched phrase, right? But you've made it kind of something sweet, right? It's like the sardines being, you know, people in a bed, right? You've turned it, reappropriated into something like positive.
It's funny because it's my house in Portugal when I was growing up with my grandparents, should I say, it was always packed. My grandma was a childminder to start with, so she looked after, on average, 10-11 kids every day. So the house was always packed, and my grandparents was one of them kind of families where if a relative was coming into town from out of town or whatever, and they needed a place to stay, we might not even had the room, but they could stay with us. So an uncle kipping on the couch, like, that's a true story. We've had an uncle that slept in the bath. Sorry, we had an uncle that slept one night in the bath because there was nowhere else for him to sleep, and he needed a roof over his head that night. So he came over and he slept in the bath, and I just thought there's something quite nice about that, because it was never a case of, oh God, we've no room. It was like, we'll make the room, and the more the merrier kind of thing. So I wanted to incorporate that, because that's the kind of family. Even my mum is like that. Like I was always the one that if there was one of my friends had been kicked out or they were going through a bit of something, my mum was always a mum that would be like, yeah, tell them to come here. And I feel like, yeah, that just says a lot. That just says everything about my family.
Yeah.
And that's a very was that an intentional, kipping,
Yeah.
kipper, for example? There's like a fish thing that
It
was that
was.
intentional, yeah. Because that's a very kind of English slang term, right? That maybe Eloise, have you heard that before?
No.
Kipping?
No.
Yeah. It's very
What does that
English,
mean?
actually. Yeah,
Kipping.
yeah, it is very English, but also with the connection to kipper, the fish and stuff, and I just thought, yeah, it's got more than one meaning.
Yeah. Would you say it's like a reclaiming of your working class background?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And the hospitality.
Yeah, I say like there's that theme is it is woven into this collection. Like you've got bargain hunting in the Best Buy aisle, which talks about when I first moved here and we'd go shopping and we didn't have a car at the time, so we were walking everywhere. And my little brother, when we moved here, my youngest brother, when we moved here, was only 6 months old, and we did use this pram as a trolley a lot of the time to carry the food home and stuff. And bargain hunting in the Best Buy aisle, like people laugh nowadays, like Aldi, you go to the Best Buy aisle and you find all sorts of crap in there, but that was us. Like we would go bargain hunting in the aisles and get the cheapest. Like growing up, we never had the same cereal twice. That's not a joke. I used to ask my mum, why can't we add what we had last week, whether it be Crave or whatever. And because we always had whatever was on offer, because that's all we could afford. We had to go for the cheapest option, so it was never the same. So yeah, I think that working class theme is heavily like woven into a lot of these poems as well.
Yeah, you put that in your collection, right? You put like, or I think it's maybe a blurb that talks about you. It says they're a working class poet. That's an identity that you've kind of claimed as well, that you kind of fly the flag on as well? That's important to you?
Absolutely. Even in Portugal, we were very, very poor, but I didn't realize that we were poor then, because we always did have food. I didn't go hungry in Portugal, but I didn't know then, because my grandparents would make sure that I had everything that I had that I needed. But it was when we came to England and my mum was by herself that I realised how poor we were. But yeah, that's influence. I claim it as an identity because it's influenced who I am. It's influenced my way of thinking. My political mindset. Everything is off the back of that. So it's really hard not to talk about it, obviously, in my writing, because it's.
I think you can really feel it. It's got such tenderness in the way you talk about it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of love.
I try not to do it in a way it's like, oh, poor me, we had no money, but it's more about the lessons that teaches you then, I feel like me and my brothers are very compassionate. We're very grateful for the things we have, because we haven't always had them, and because now that we can go out and buy the trainers that we like or whatever, we're still very much like, grateful for everything that we have and stuff. So I try to do it in a positive way, rather than like, oh, woo me kind of thing,
Yeah, and I think that's refreshing, because I don't think there's a lot of writing that puts poverty in a positive light. In a way.
Relative poverty.
Yeah.
I'm just very grateful that you guys have had me on, and I'm really excited that you've partnered up with Benki. Obviously, I think it's a great thing. I'm very big on collaboration in the creative industries, because it's writing can be a very lonely thing, can't it? You're writing just for yourself a lot of the time, and it's a very like. Yeah, it can be a lonely thing to do, but I think we must collaborate with each other, because that's how you reach different people. That's how you connect people, different kinds of people, different backgrounds and everything. And I have found recently that there's a bit of a divide across the community in Manchester, and I don't know if you guys know of Brian Dunn from Northern Poets Society, but again, he's very, very big on collaboration, and I'm learning a lot. I'm learning that from him. That's, you know, if you're not collaborating, then you're just doing it for you, aren't you? And what's the point in that? I feel like collaboration is key to move forward. So yeah, I'm happy for your collaboration, and
Yeah, that's a lovely message, and I think that's also what we're trying to do with the podcast, is bring all these, making links between all the poets and showing how much of a community there is in the UK, you know, and how great, I mean, even beyond the UK as well. So if people really, they discover you and they love your work, they can find you, where are you the most active?
I'm most active on Instagram at Romina Writes. I'm also over on Twitter on the same handle, and I've just started a Substack newsletter last week. I see that all the writers are on there now, so I thought I'd give it a bit of a go on there, see what happens. So that's Poetry is Cheaper Than Therapy. I co-run a little art company with my partner called Print the Poet, where we do art inspired by poetry. So that's prints, t-shirts, all sorts of stuff. And our mantra is poetry is cheaper than therapy, because I genuinely believe that. For me, poetry is like actually saved my life and took me out some dark places. So yeah, so that's my name.
Yeah.
Well,
tell us a bit more about that.
My dad, who I never met, actually died back in 2017. And it's been a really weird time, because I've not known whether I'm allowed to grieve or how to feel, or, you know, it's not been a loss because I never had him and all these other things. And I feel like I definitely do need to go to therapy for that. I'm not saying poetry is, you know, like a band-aid instead of the therapy, but writing about that over the last few weeks has really, really helped me to like deal with it in different ways. It's firstly made me realize that only I can give myself permission to grieve. It's not up to anybody else, and if I want to, then I can, and that's fine. But yeah, that's just an example of like it's a traumatic thing that I've gone through, but writing poetry about it has helped me so much. And if I can, I'm going to start doing some workshops this year on this subject, but I just must encourage anyone and everyone to write. Even if you're not a poet and you're not a writer, write. Even if it's just for you, don't show anyone. But I promise anyone listening to this, if you write something down, it will help you look at it objectively and maybe think about it a little bit different. And a really great prompt that I find, that if you've no inspiration or you don't know how to start, write a 1-star Rotten Tomatoes review about the worst thing that's ever happened in your life. And I've learned this from a poet from America called Andrea Gibson, who's a fantastic poet. And they do a newsletter as well on Substack, and I saw this prompt on there: write a 1-star review. It doesn't have to be Rotten Tomatoes, it could be Amazon, whatever you use, about the worst thing that's ever happened in your life. And you know, doing that, you'll be able to look at it in a different light. You'll be able to see it not as such a traumatic thing, but you'll be able to maybe see it in a bit light and be able to, you know, work things out that way. But yeah, I must encourage anyone and everyone to write, even just for yourself. Not show anyone, but just write.
Yeah, and you have to start the review with "wouldn't recommend."
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Yeah, well, this is the thing: is this poet? They had cancer, or ovarian cancer, and they wrote this 1-star review about that. But the way they did it was like taking the piss out of it. So, you know, it sounds like such a really, you know, it's really deep, and it's personal. It's heavy. It's
finding the humor in the darker situations.
Yeah, they found the humor in that, and they wrote a review, and they flipped on its side, and I just thought, you know what, that's brilliant. And I've done something similar with this whole situation, and it's made me see it in a bit of a lighter way, and yeah, it's made me analyze it, and think about things differently, and I think it's helped me. So I think that if anyone wants to give that a go, you've nothing to lose at all.
I mean, to that, I think it's a good ending.
Yeah.
Well, it was lovely
Can I
having
just
you,
ask-
Romina. Sorry, Tom, yeah?
Yes.
Can I just ask? It's interesting what you said. The art about poetry. That you said what's that? A workshop or activity you're doing?
Yeah.
Art
So,
about poetry.
we make. It started off because my girlfriend's an illustrator. She's an artist. She's a painter, and she did for my birthday last year. We were a bit skin. We didn't really have much money to do much, with COVID and everything. So what she did is she made my own. She printed a load of my poems and she illustrated them and she made me a little like pamphlet, a little book of my own poetry. It's fantastic. I still have it. But she's always she always illustrates my poems. She'll find the poem that she likes and it'll spark something in and she'll illustrate it and she'll make art out.
Nice. And you don't have to pay her.
I don't have to pay it.
That's great.
Loves doing it, and we decided to come up with this thing just to make a bit of money on the side as well. And because she's an artist, and I'm always trying to encourage her, she doesn't really believe in herself too much. We're our own worst critics, aren't we? But I really try to encourage her to do it. So she was like, so we decided we'd do it together because then she's got a bit of support from me. So we launched this thing called Print a Poet, and we do anything. But yeah, we create art inspired by poetry. Started off as just my own, but any poetry really.
Yeah. And you have little pins, don't you? Poetry is cheaper than therapy. I think that can really hit off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, lovely. Then get a pin.
Nice.
If you listen to this, get a pin. And it was lovely talking to you, Romina.
Restent 2 femmes et un parapluie au coin de la rue. Papotage féminin de voix. La brunerie secoue ses cheveux. De l'autre côté de la rue, l'homme les observe, de loin, de dos.
Thank you for listening to Poetry to Your Ears.
Son sac à dos pour les imprimés.
This podcast is published as a newsletter on Substack. All of our content is published for free, but if you would like to support our work, you can become a paid subscriber. This will help us afford transcripts for the deaf and hard of hearing community, and anyone who would benefit from reading the podcast alongside hearing it. You can also support us for free by rating the show on Spotify and Apple Podcast or writing a review on Apple Podcast. Share the show with your friends, fellow poets and poetry lovers. If you want to interact with us, you can follow us on @poetry2yourears on Instagram and @poetry2 on Twitter, or you can also write a comment on Substack. If you're American and you're listening to us, send us a message. Half of our listeners are American. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time!